Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the next episode of the show. And today we're going to be talking about that big word called equality. And certainly in this country, lots and lots of discussions, not just Muslims, but generally in this country and society here, about equality between men and women, actually, what it means. But not just men and women, we have other lots of laws here, laws that get revised regularly, that really try and treat everybody as equally with each other as they can. So we have laws here, we have an Equality Act here, which tries to protect the rights of every citizen, different backgrounds, genders, and all different issues. So obviously we have those discussions here anyway, and certainly we know as Muslims there's always talk about the relationship between men and women and whether they're equal or not, and can they ever really be equal. And we also know that there are cases in Muslim countries, and that happens here as well, where actually the status of women is seen to be less than men. And then that is used, especially by men, but also women then allow that to happen, because they don't know any different perhaps, or because they're actually taught that that's okay. So I think it's important for us to just talk about this generally, but also specifically from the Muslim perspective, the teachings that we know are there about equality between men and women and what that really means. I think we have to always remind ourselves when we talk in any context about equality, especially between men and women, we're not talking about people being the same. People don't have to be the same. And I think there's lots and lots of books and research in modern times, as well as we know even from our own teachings and the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that men and women generally have different natures, different ways of doing things, different ways of approaching things, different ways of relating to people. These are I think the beautiful differences that Allah has actually made in all of us. Obviously we have our own personalities and all of that, but we know that there's chance, and actually it's very, very clear for me and for all of us should be, that actually men and women in terms of spiritual sense are actually equal. So I think in Surah 49 verse 13 it talks about, we made you into nations and tribes, and then talks about different languages and colours, so that the most honourable, are those with taqwa. And of course this is really important, and it's a good way for us to start, because we are talking about men and women. Everything that is there for men is there for women when it comes to in the sight of God. And this is not to say that we're the same. As I've said, equality does not have to mean that. And our faith teaches us that there's a guideline, there are frameworks that we have to work within, there are laws. But I always say, and I've said, in so many different forums and even in different episodes of this show, that, our religion is not about a list of rules and regulations and do's and don'ts and yes and no. And anybody who makes this faith black and white like that, it never works. For me, it never works, because this faith, our faith, has never been about black and white. At the time of the Prophet, there was always diversity of thought, diversity of allowing people to express themselves in different ways and be who they are, at the same time living within the boundaries that we know the faith puts over for us. And I think we need to obviously always be looking, always be learning, and this is for men and for women. But the teachings of Islam, when they came, were, absolutely transformational for women especially. And it's just wow. When you actually read about how things were before Islam came, and then how they were when Islam, the teachings through the Prophet, peace be upon him, the revelations of the Quran were, it's just, it must have been amazing. It must have been difficult. I think it would have been difficult for men and for women to really see how it could be so different. But of course it was just, it was fair, and people, especially I'm sure the women at the time, would have welcomed it fairly quickly, because for them it would have been life-changing. For people who had known both, it's actually, I think, hard for us to sometimes imagine. Women were literally seen as objects or possessions of men, were bought and sold, literally, were just not treated equally or fairly, didn't have the right to own anything, didn't really have their own money, were living a life essentially to serve men. And actually we have to say and recognise that even in this country and in other countries around the world, there are still issues with this. The treatment of women is not positive in many places, including in this country. So, you know, often people relate these things just to Islam and Muslims and the sort of bad practices that people see even now. But actually, there's things happening right now in this country, and even as little as 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, the status of women in this country was very, very, very much seen as secondary to men. Actually, it was very much a men-only society in many ways in this country. And things like the work and, you know, how looking at equal pay, for example, for women, some of these issues are still issues now. We have far fewer, for example, women MPs in this country than men, much, much less. I'm not talking now about Muslims, I'm talking about generally in this country. There are still issues where men and women do the same job and women are paid less than men. So these issues of sort of equality and how that then translate to fairness are ongoing issues. And I think for us, we have what we know was an absolutely amazing you know, transformation really from a time where it was very, very dark and actually would have been very difficult for women to a time when their, you know, their whole lives would have suddenly opened up. And of course it wasn't straight away. Things happened gradually, and the Prophet himself, peace be upon him, was able to teach people, and often things would be taught and the women would probably get very excited, and then the men would complain that, you know, what's going to happen, and you're giving them their kind of rights and they're going to go off and do all sorts of things that are contrary to what we think they should be doing. So there must have been a lot of challenges. I'm sure the Prophet himself would have dealt with a lot of issues, and we've seen stories and we hear hadith all the time. And of course, even now in some countries, Muslim countries, there are, and even in this country where Muslims have not understood this properly, there's inequality. You know, there's oppression. Women are treated badly. Laws are, you know, misinterpreted to favour men. There are, you know, too much balances towards men and not enough towards women. Education for girls is seen as much less important than boys. And these are still issues that are happening now. And the sad thing for me is that we know that the faith itself, the teachings and the way of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is very, very clear. And yet we see actually sometimes the exact opposite. I see it in Britain amongst some of our Muslim communities here, where they've misunderstood certain aspects of this issue and have just, you know, really, really do use it to suppress and keep women back and not allow them to develop and flourish, and even really have see themselves as having anything to offer. So I think, and the Quran obviously reminds us that this is wrong, and we see throughout there's so many different examples, and through the life of the Prophet, how he was with women. You know, how did he treat women that came to him? Why did women go to him and ask him for advice and guidance if they felt that he wasn't going to treat them fairly? And of course, he always did, peace be upon him. And right from the start of creation, so if we take it right back, men and women were created equally. So as far as we understand it from the Quran itself, and in Surah 4, it mentions there's no concept of original sin. So Adam and Eve were created equally, and they're seen as twin halves of each other. So, you know, right back to basics. This idea that women came and sort of, you know, shaitan tempted the man, and he did this kind of concept that we have in other faiths, and other faiths talk about this quite openly. We just don't have. When it comes to religious rituals, they're all equal. You know, from a spiritual sense, fasting and Hajj and prayer and all of the things that we treat very seriously and we take as a core part of our faith, all of that is up for grabs for men and for women. You know, we're taught, and I remember being taught from a very early time of looking at Islam and becoming Muslim, that when it comes to the Day of Judgment, as a woman or as a mother, it doesn't really matter, because actually on that day I'm going to be there on my own. I'm not going to be able to rely on my husband or my father or my children. Really, it's going to be what I did, and I'm going to have to answer to God directly. And I think it's an amazing part of our faith that we also have a direct connection with Allah, and we have conversations with him, and it doesn't matter what your age is and whether you're men and women, you have equal access to him, you have equal right to him and equal right to have that conversation with him. And these are fundamental things that I think are important. And actually in some of the rituals, if anything, sometimes it's made easier for women. When women are menstruating and not having to pray, or through issues of childbirth, there's certain things they don't have to do. And we need to see that as a positive, something that's been given as a way of easing things for women that sometimes can be quite difficult. And of course, we know so much reward, so much blessing for women in childbirth, for being a mother, and how many rights are given, how much the Prophet taught us, peace be upon him, to respect your mother over anybody else. So I think, when we see oppression and inequality between men and women, and then we read the teachings, some of it just absolutely does not match. And that's where we need to think about it and, use our brain more. There's a surah here that says, whoever does righteous acts, whether male or female, while he is a believer, to him we will give a good life, and we shall pay them certainly reward in proportion to the best they used to do. Now, again, there's no it's not favoured over men and women. It's meant for everybody. And there's another long surah that we know in 33, where it talks about how the believing men, believing women, being humble, giving charity, fasting, guarding your chastity, being steadfast, applies to men and women equally. And so it's really important that we remind ourselves of this. Why would that be in the Quran when we then look at how women are treated or made to feel that they don't have access to this? It actually doesn't make any sense and doesn't fit. There's no difference. Women have the same moral obligations as men, and they're of course both deserving of honour, respect and integrity between them and separately. And the way I always kind of try and think about my life, and I'm married and I have children, is that I am my own person as well. And it's all about how do I develop my relationship with Allah directly, and I don't have to go through anybody to do that. I can have conversations with him, I can pray to him, I can ask him for whatever I need to, every day, as much as I like, and I will be rewarded or not for whatever I do or don't do. That's how it is. That's my relationship with God. I don't need anybody to tell me how much of that not to do or to do. And of course, when you're a wife and when you're a mother and your daughter and a sister and a daughter-in-law, you have your roles and responsibilities. And we speak about that in some of the other episodes in more detail. But clearly generally and for the sort of obligations, we know that men and women are absolutely equal. And I think it's always good for us to remind ourselves and look at the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and how was he with women. And by looking at that, we can really get a good sense of how things should be. And after the break, we'll talk more about some of these issues and maybe some of the practical things and how we can really develop this area. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about this big word called equality, and it's always a topic that I think we need to remind ourselves of. And we know that things are not always understood in the way that I think they should be, both by Muslim men and by Muslim women. And so we always have to constantly remind ourselves of the teachings, of the way of the Prophet and how he did things, and how he absolutely lived a life that was equal for men and for women, and taught them in that way as well. I think, again, we also, before the break, I spoke about how things were before Islamic teachings came through the Prophet, and how women were bought and sold, and how they were just really seen as objects, and how Islam really lifted that and actually gave a life that would have been totally different. And I sometimes try and imagine what that must have felt like for the women of that time. It must have been amazing. And I think sometimes as well we think about the theory, and we can all talk about the theory, and often I hear Muslims talk about 1400 years ago women were given these rights, and even in this country, in Britain now, in the West, people often say they're still not. And surely that is true, but we also have to acknowledge when things go wrong as well. And we see in many of our Muslim countries where even laws are made that are there, I feel, to oppress and keep women back and not allowing them to flourish and develop and be their own person. We know that women can engage in any financial dealings, own property, buy and sell. We have enough examples of it. We talk a lot about Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her, the first wife of the Prophet. And actually, if you actually stop and think about it, their relationship was amazing, one of the best love stories ever. And I think we look at her life, she was a smart, intelligent businesswoman of the day. So she was a business person, actually. And she carried on dealing in business after he became a prophet and after she was Muslim. And of course, we see her as a fair, someone who really knew what she was doing. She was somebody who was very, very well respected. And the fact that she happened to be a woman. Now, obviously, the Prophet could have said to her, you're not going to carry on with that, after he'd had the teachings. If the teachings really taught us that somehow women should not be engaged in any of these activities, he would have done that. And he would have actually said to her that you have to stop, or that you can't do this anymore, or this is not right, or men and women, have different roles and it's only a men's world and men have to conduct business and women can't. And of course he didn't do that. He actually encouraged it, and they had a very supportive and loving relationship. And we know that, and we genuinely can feel proud that our faith taught us these things 1400 years ago that some people are only just kind of getting to grips with now. I said in the first half that even in this country, which is seen as progressive and modern, and there's many, many issues between men and women, how women are viewed as sometimes as objects, and how the equal pay, for example, between men and women are just not there. So there are issues, and we should feel proud of our faith and the fact that our faith has these teachings. There's a very nice saying that I think sums up sometimes when it comes to certainly financial matters for Muslim women, and that is, what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine. And often amongst Muslim women, there's always good jokes, and we can have a laugh about this. But actually, it relates to how women can earn money, whether that be through a job or through business, and there's no issue with that whatsoever. And we know that from, again, if you take it back, if we're saying that we're following the way of the Prophet and the way he did things and that he was the perfect example of humanity, and of course he was, then let's look at what he did. Let's look at what he allowed. Let's look at what he encouraged. Let's look at how women dealt with him and really see that as our model of going forward. And a woman's finances, however she earns her money, and obviously in a good way, a halal income, if you like, is hers. She doesn't have then an obligation to have to spend it on anything that she doesn't want to spend it on. And actually the obligation comes on the man more. If that's the kind of arrangement, if you're married and in a family home, then the responsibility actually falls more on the man to provide and to make sure that the home is running in a way that is in the way that it should be. And obviously modern kind of, if you like, relationships between men and women and circumstances, and certainly financially. I mean, in this country, there are obviously many, but there are families where only one person works, and normally that will be the man, and the woman stays home looking after their children. Often something that's popular in this country is for women to start business. So they'll start, there's a lot of support here for people to be in business. There'll be start-up programs where people are encouraged to start their own business, and sometimes they're very much targeted towards women who may feel that working full-time outside of the home will have too much of an impact on the children, on themselves, and so they decide to maybe start their own business or work part-time. And all of these options are there for us here. And of course, it's always about how to keep the balance. I think sometimes the arguments about men and women and working, and certainly amongst the Muslim community, the argument always is that, it has too much impact on the family. And if it has an impact on the family, then it shouldn't be allowed. And I actually feel this is a very narrow view. I think there's lots and lots of opportunities, lots of ways that you can work out a good arrangement between the couple and that works for the family and keeps things in balance. And as I always say, and as my children always repeat from me, when things are out of balance, you kind of know. And if you know that your life is out of balance, if you're working and it's too much, if it's too stressful, if you're taking it out on your children or your husband, or haven't got a good home life, or you're not feeling satisfied, then there's probably time to have a look and think maybe this isn't for me. But I think for people to say that Islam itself doesn't allow it, of course we know that's not the case. And there was I remember reading an example of a really nice story that I often use to illustrate actually many different things, because I think within this story there's many different lessons. And it was the story of a woman at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, who actually had more money than her husband. And she wanted to know, and said to her husband, she wanted to give him money in charity. And of course, again, if you actually look at the reality in some of our Muslim countries where women are made to feel that they can't earn money, or that they can't have a life, or that they can't develop themselves, look at this story and realise if that was the case, why would this have happened? And just think of it in that way. So she actually asked her husband, of course, and asked him to find out from the Prophet, peace be upon him, was it allowed? Was it okay for her to do that? And of course, the husband was actually quite embarrassed. The idea of him having less than her and then having to go and ask this, the man of the prophet of God, whether it was allowed for her to give him charity. I think he was quite embarrassed and felt awkward. So she went and asked him herself. So she went to him and asked him. And of course, he actually said it was allowed. So I think the fact that she went and asked him directly, there's a lesson there for us now in some of our Muslim communities where women are made to feel that they can't approach an imam, or they can't approach a scholar directly, or they have to do it from behind some sort of artificial barrier or screen, or pass a piece of paper. I just think, we need to just look at the way women approached the Prophet, asked him such questions, asked him difficult personal questions about their personal life or about their own health, why was that? He made them feel that he was approachable and they could ask him anything. And sometimes I just don't see that replicated. So I think that's an amazing story in terms of his example of so many things that I've tried to cover in this brief episode. So I think in summary, really, just to remind ourselves that right at the core, right from the beginning, we're taught that men and women are absolutely equal when it comes to God, from God. So women have access to God just as much as men do. Women have chance to get to Jannah just as much as men do. And women should never be made to feel, and men should never make them feel, that they are somehow second class or, not as important as men, and that men are somehow in charge. And of course we know there's roles, responsibilities, and we talk about that a lot, and it's important to do that. But to really look at the stories, look at the history, look at this man that we hold as the best of humanity, and how did he deal with women? And what did he bring? And what light did he lift on society that was very, very dark for women before? And in some countries, like my own here, some issues are still there. People feel that we've progressed and somehow modern way of living and things are good. And actually there are issues. There are many, many issues. And women sometimes don't always recognise those issues as even being oppressive. So I think we have something to be proud of. Our teachings are very clear. The example of the Prophet is amazing, and we need to use that to really remind ourselves. And if things are going wrong for many people, which they are, especially for women, remind yourself, educate yourself, and find out what the core teachings of our faith are. And if that's what we're claiming to follow, that's what we should be following. I hope this has been useful. I hope it's given some food for thought, maybe addressed some of the concerns or issues that people have had. And until the next episode, Assalamu alaikum.